All right, everyone. Big news. So Twitter, TikTok, Instagram going off because the one and only Blackjack has posted an update on Kung Fu Panda 4. He announced a couple of casting things. We have Viola Davis and Awkwafina joining Kung Fu Panda 4. And we know that there's going to be a trailer tomorrow. And DreamWorks, they dropped a new synopsis. And so I'm kind of going through it. And I have some thoughts. I'm excited. There's a lot of interesting things happening and a little skeptical. But yeah, so I think it'd be cool to just kind of go through the synopsis, see what we're looking at, because Kung Fu Panda 4, I think a lot of people, when they heard that Kung Fu Panda 4 was going to happen, they're like, oh, what's the story? What's next? Like, they had a good trilogy. It seemed like they wrapped things up nicely. And I more or less agree with that, but I love Kung Fu Panda, and I'm excited to get more. And so let's kind of see what's going on here. So after 3 death-defying adventures defeating world-class villains with his unmatched courage and mad martial arts skills, Po, the Dragon Warrior, is called upon by destiny to give it a rest already. More specifically, he's tapped to become the spiritual leader of the Valley of Peace. That poses a couple of obvious problems. First, Po knows as much about spiritual leadership as he does about the paleo diet. And second, he needs to quickly find and train a new Dragon Warrior before he can assume his new lofty position. I think this is a solid pitch. I think being like a spiritual leader means that Po is going to need to mature in like many new different ways, and finding like a new Dragon Warrior could be really interesting. Like having Po let go of that control, that status, and like know that he doesn't need to be like the hero anymore, and that like other people can fight his battles too. It's like kind of like passing on the torch. And I think like that's what the meat of this movie is going to be. And yeah, it could be kind of like almost like a retirement, like last hurrah movie, which feels weird because like Po in my mind is still very like a young panda. I think it'll be good. Don't exactly know what like the spiritual leader even means in the Valley of Peace. Like I assume he's just gonna like be in the position that Oogway had at the beginning of their first movie. But I'm not really sure what that means or like even practically looks like. And I don't even think we're going to get to see what that means in this movie. Most of this movie will probably be about like kind of preparing the next Dragon Warrior and like seeing the next Dragon Warrior kind of come into, their own. I also think it's interesting that they're training one, because before Po, there was no Dragon Warrior, right? Like for all of existence in the Valley of Peace, there was none until Po, right? And like he was the first, and so it's interesting that they're making it a mantle that's passed on. And but I think there's a lot of interesting things that they can play here, on like what the Dragon Warrior means or represents, and like why a Dragon Warrior is needed, and like what Po has learned in the last 3 movies as a Dragon Warrior, and then also the new Dragon Warrior. They can really challenge what is needed and what was and what is now and what should be. And taking ownership of what like the Dragon Warrior means, which I think is interesting. There's a lot of good stuff there. I'm excited, and so we can move on. Even worse, there's been a recent sighting of a wicked, powerful sorceress, Chameleon, played by Viola Davis, a tiny lizard who can shapeshift into any creature, large or small. And Chameleon has her greedy, beady little eyes on Poe's Staff of Wisdom, which would give her the power to resummon all the master villains whom Po has vanquished to the spirit realm. And I think this is where things get tricky because if you're looking back at the last 3 movies, right, in these Kung Fu Panda movies, the villains work when they're directly tied to the meat of the movie. Right? Like basically, like it just means that movies are good when the emotional level and the plot level like intertwine and like they build upon each other. And like in the first movie, you have like Tai Lung and Po. They're like direct juxtapositions of one another, right? Like Tai Lung is the perfect warrior and Po is like the least likely warrior, and like their perceived identities of like what they are and what they should be, like that drives the conflict in the movie, right? And in the second movie, like Shen and Po are both on parallel journeys of like grief and bitterness and hurt, and like their hurt and grief drives their action, and Po decides to like use it for good and heal, and Shen lets it like consume him. And in the third, like Kai doesn't really work as well, mostly because like he's not really related to Po or like directly opposed to him. He just wants revenge on Oogway, and like Po's having daddy issues, and they're like 2 separate things that are just happening, and they happen to happen at the same time, right? And one doesn't really affect the other, and that's why I think Kai is the weakest villain by far in the series. And if like the meat of the movie is letting go of control and passing on a legacy and kind of like teaching and like this passing of the torch, like I'm not really sure how Chameleon fits into this, but I think it could work because while we're looking into the future with the Dragon Warrior, we can also go into the past with like the villains and see how Po as a person has grown since they like first faced them, right? And like I think there's obviously like that knee-jerk reaction of like, oh no, like nostalgia bait, like I don't want that, but I think there's like a potential there. Because I assume like the final showdown is going to be Chameleon getting the staff and like summoning Tai Lung and maybe Kai and having a big face-off, right? And like we can see them defeat them differently now and see how like they approach things differently and like all the new things he's learned, right? And it doesn't like fully like click perfectly in my mind. mostly because we don't know like Chameleon's motivations. But I think there's potential there, and I do think an interesting part is like, oh, it's talking about like resummoning all the master villains Poe has vanquished, and I haven't. I don't. I watched the Legends of Awesomeness series. Don't fully remember a lot of it. I know there's 2 Netflix series like Paws of Power or something, and then like the British one, something like that. But yeah, like Shen actually died. He got crushed by a big like wooden beam, and like Kai went to the spirit realm, but then he got destroyed there. So I think maybe it's only Tai Lung that's coming back, which then it just feels weird that they're kind of like using that, like, oh, like can resummon all the master villains from like the spirit realm or whatever that means. And so I'm just interested. It seems like they're having specifically Tai Lung come back for a reason. Maybe a redemption arc or something, but I'm not really sure. I don't know. No thoughts yet. Well, we'll see with the trailer. So Poe's gonna need some help. He finds it kinda in the form of crafty, quick-witted thief Zhen Aquafina, a Corsac fox who really gets under Poe's fur, but whose skills will prove invaluable. Wow, I cannot read. In their quest to protect the Valley of Peace from Chameleon's reptilian claws, this comedic odd couple duo will have to work together. In the process, Poe will discover that heroes can be found in the most unexpected places. And this is where I really get nervous about this movie, because I think this reveals like what the entirety of the second act is going to be. It's just going to be like an Unlikely Friends buddy cop detective movie with Jack Black and Awkwafina, and like the types of characters that Awkwafina plays, and she's going to be this like wisecracking, fun, sarcastic, like zany person, and like it's kind of concerning because like as a base personality, Poe is a zany character. He's goofy, he's weird, he's funny. And it shows just like the tone of this movie, right? Like the first 2 movies, I think they struck a great tone between like that funny goofiness and like some dark themes. And the third one was kind of just like a kid's movie with a lot less weight. And like I don't really want to continue going down that route with that one. And like that last sentence, right? Like Poe will discover that heroes can be found in the most unexpected places. Like I feel like we learned that lesson. Like other people learned that lesson about Poe in the first movie, and in the third movie, like he did that same thing where he kind of like he learned to teach his pandas to be like what pandas could be. He learned like the same lesson that Shifu did, kind of, and like help maximize their abilities. And like I'm just like it's been a theme and a lesson that has been taught over and over again in Kung Fu Panda, and like I think we can grow past that. Like we can get over like, oh, like they're small or not big or whatever, and like we've understood that, right? So this really concerns me because like that shows like the entirety of this movie is really gonna be focused around Awkwafina's character and Poe. And I don't know, just kind of like off the bat, like I know Awkwafina can play like serious real characters, like and she can do that drama, but like I just don't think DreamWorks is bringing her in for that, so like that concerns me, right? And the last paragraph is just talking about like the voice cast. Like the film features the voice talent of Dustin Hoffman as Shifu, James Hong as Mr. Ping, Poe's dad, Bryan Cranston as Poe's like birth father, Ian McShane is coming back as Tai Lung and Shifu's former student and nemesis, and then Ki Hui Kwan, whatever his name is joining as a new character, Han, the leader of the Den of Thieves. And it's interesting that none of the Furious Five are confirmed to return in this press release, which is tough. And I think they have to return, but like they're probably gonna be like not big players in the movie, which is tough. That sucks. But like haven't really been real characters since maybe like the middle of the second movie, which is tough. Because I really enjoy them, and I know everyone loves Kihei Kwan, but he's like in everything now, right? And like it seems like he's gonna be like the father or friend of Awkwafina's character, like Den of Thieves, and she's a thief, and like, I don't know. I feel like he's another reason why like the tone feels like it's gonna be super light and funny, which is unfortunate. I think that they can go darker in a lot of ways and more mature with Kung Fu Panda. It's similar things with what I talked about with like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles of like growing with an audience, which I think could be cool. But I guess tomorrow with the trailer we'll see, and I'll probably have a lot more thoughts then. But I'm excited for Kung Fu Panda 4, and let's do it.